Homeless woman sings to feed her child until a car stops and Johnny Depp appears. The wind was sharp that night in Los Angeles, biting through Clara's thin coat as she huddled in the corner of an old bus station with her 18-month-old daughter, Lily, bundled tightly against her chest. The bench they sat on was worn and cold, its metal surface making it impossible for her to find comfort. She had wrapped Lily in the last blanket they had, though it did little to keep the chill at bay. For hours, the streets had been quiet, the usual hum of city life reduced to the occasional car passing in the distance. Clara hummed softly, the same lullaby she had sung countless nights, trying to calm her daughter as her cries echoed off the empty concrete walls. The sound felt heavy, lonely, until Lily's soft sobs finally quieted, replaced by her even, sleeping breaths. Clara closed her eyes, resting her head against the peeling wooden wall behind her. Just months ago, life had been so different. She had a job at a diner downtown, a small but cozy apartment, and enough hope to get by. She wasn't wealthy, but they were happy. Lily's laughter filled the space, her tiny steps chasing rays of sunlight that streamed through the single window. Clara worked long shifts, but she loved coming home to her daughter's squeals and hugs. It all felt stable, until one day, the restaurant owner announced they were closing. At first, she believed she could find something else, but weeks turned into months. Unpaid bills piled up until the landlord locked her out, and a partner, the one person she thought she could rely on, left without a word. Homelessness happened faster than Clara ever imagined. One day, she was planning meals for Lily, saving for new shoes, and the next, she was scouring the streets, learning to survive with nothing but a backpack and the thin hope that someone might offer kindness. But kindness was rare. She had sung on street corners for change, cradling Lily in her arms as pedestrians avoided her gaze. Most people walked by without a second thought, their faces turned towards some unseen horizon, as if acknowledging her would cost them too much. Tonight was just like every other. She rubbed Lily's tiny back, whispering words of comfort into her daughter's ear. "We're okay, baby. Mommy's here." It was all she could offer, but she whispered it like a promise, even when she wasn't sure she could keep it. Her voice trembled, and she blinked against the tears that threatened to fall. She had to be strong for Lily. The sound of an engine pulled her from her thoughts. A black SUV slowed near the edge of the bus station parking lot. Clara stiffened instinctively, holding Lily closer. Experience had taught her to be cautious. The car didn't move for a moment, its headlights cutting through the dark, casting shadows around her. Just as she prepared to move, the engine turned off, and the door opened. Clara tensed as a tall figure stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. Her heartbeat quickened as he approached, the light catching his face. She froze. It was him, Johnny Depp. Clara stared, unsure if the cold and exhaustion had made her hallucinate. But no, this was real. He wore a simple jacket, a scarf wrapped loosely around his neck, and his face, though familiar from countless movies, looked softer, kinder in person. His eyes met hers as he crouched a few feet away, giving her space, as if sensing her unease. "That was you singing, wasn't it?" he asked, his voice warm and low. Clara hesitated, unsure how to respond. She nodded, holding Lily protectively. I sing for her," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Johnny glanced down at Lily, who was now stirring, her eyes peeking up at the unfamiliar man. "Hi, sweetheart," he said softly, offering the hint of a smile. Turning his attention back to Clara, he spoke again. "You have a beautiful voice." Clara blinked, unsure how to process what was happening. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice thick. She hadn't heard a compliment in what felt like forever. Johnny seemed to take in the scene. The worn blanket, the bags at her feet, the exhaustion etched into her features. His expression shifted, turning more serious. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Clara swallowed hard, fighting the shame that rose in her chest. She hated pity. "We're just trying to get by," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her throat. Johnny studied her for a long moment, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a stack of cash, folding it carefully before holding it out to her. Clara's breath caught as she stared at the money. It was more than she had seen in weeks. "Here," he said gently. "Use it for whatever you and your daughter need." Clara's hands trembled as she accepted the cash. The tears she had tried so hard to hold back, finally slipping down her cheeks. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You don't need to say anything," Johnny replied, his tone kind but firm. He hesitated before adding, "Have you ever thought about singing professionally?" Clara blinked in surprise. "Me? I've only ever sung for Lily." Johnny smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's how it starts. I know someone who runs a small studio nearby. They're always looking for talent. If you're interested, I can give you their information." Clara stared at him, overwhelmed. This had to be a dream, some impossible moment born from desperation. But Johnny's gaze was steady, sincere. He reached into his pocket again and handed her a small card with a handwritten number and an address. "Call them tomorrow," he said gently. "Tell them I sent you. If you need help getting there, let me know." She clutched the card as if it might vanish, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice shaking. Johnny stood, his smile soft. "You're stronger than you think," he said. He gave Lily a small wave before turning back toward his car. As he drove away into the night, Clara sat motionless, staring down at the card in her hands. For the first time in months, hope flickered inside her, a fragile but unmistakable light. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of Lily's quiet babbling. The card Johnny had given her was still tucked into her coat pocket, its edges worn from where she had held it tight through the night. As the sun began to rise, Clara made a decision. She would call. She found a payphone at the corner of a quiet street and dialed the number with trembling hands. A woman answered on the other end, her voice cheerful. "This is Lisa from Ember Studios. How can I help you?" Clara hesitated, glancing at Lily perched on her hip. "Hi, Johnny Depp told me to call. He said you might need singers." There was a pause, and then Lisa's tone shifted warmly. "You're the one Johnny mentioned. Can you come in today? We'd love to meet you." Clara's breath caught. "Yes, I'll be there." The studio was tucked away in a quiet part of the city, a modest building with large glass windows. Clara stood outside for a moment, nerves twisting in her stomach. She was terrified. What if they thought she wasn't good enough? What if Johnny had been wrong? But when she stepped inside, Lisa greeted her with a bright smile, easing some of her fears. "Welcome, Clara. We've been expecting you." A man named Sam, the studio's producer, led her into a small recording booth. "Take your time," he said gently. "Sing whatever feels right." Clara closed her eyes as she stepped up to the microphone, Lily watching her curiously from Lisa's arms. She took a deep breath, the melody of the lullaby she always sang to Lily filling her mind. Her voice started soft, wavering with nerves, but as the song flowed from her lips, it grew stronger. Each note held her story, her struggles, her love for Lily, her desperate hope for a better life. When she opened her eyes, Sam was staring at her through the glass, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Clara," he said through the intercom, "you have something incredible." Tears stung her eyes as she stepped back, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. Sam leaned closer to the microphone. "How would you feel about recording with us? Just a few songs to start. We can help you find your sound." Clara felt as though the world had tilted. This couldn't be real. "Me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You," Sam said firmly. "You're exactly what we're looking for." Clara's heart swelled as she looked at Lily, still wide-eyed in Lisa's arms. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She felt like she was moving forward. The weeks that followed were a blur of hard work and hope. Clara spent every free moment in the studio, recording tracks and learning about her voice. Sam guided her, pushing her gently to trust herself, to believe she belonged there. Lily became a fixture in the studio, her laughter filling the space between recordings. When the first track was completed, Sam played it back for Clara. She listened, tears streaming down her face, unable to believe the voice she heard was hers. Johnny had stopped by once or twice, always encouraging her, reminding her why she had started. Months later, Clara stood in a small venue, her first live performance about to begin. The lights dimmed, and she stepped onto the stage with Lily's picture tucked into her pocket. Her voice filled the room, raw and beautiful, each note carrying the weight of everything she had overcome. When the song ended, the audience erupted into applause, and for the first time in a long while, Clara allowed herself to dream. She thought of Johnny and the small act of kindness that had brought her here, and she smiled. Sometimes the smallest moments could change a life forever.